So today, we're going to talk about someone truly remarkable, A.P.J. Abdul Kalam. You've probably heard him called the People's President, and for good reason. His story is this incredible journey from a tiny coastal town straight to the highest office in all of India. It really makes you wonder, right? How does a kid from a small fishing town become not just one of the nation's top scientists, but its most beloved president? Well, that's exactly the story we're going to unpack today. So to really get who he was, we've got to go way back to the beginning, to his humble roots, because that's where the foundation for everything he became was laid. All right, picture this. It's 1931 in a small coastal town called Rameswaram. That's where Kalam was born. His family was anything but wealthy. His dad owned a boat and his mom was a housewife. I mean, it's about as modest a start as you can get for a life that was going to reach, well, stratospheric heights. And you can see his character being built right from the get-go. As a little kid, he was out there selling newspapers just to help his family get by. And that experience, it gave him this incredible discipline. That sense of responsibility, that nonstop work ethic. That wasn't just a childhood thing. It literally defined the rest of his life. His education was basically a trip all across southern India, always reaching for the next level. He started right there in his hometown, then went off to Tiruchirappalli for physics. But the real goal, his true passion, was aerospace engineering. And for that, he landed a spot at the super prestigious Madras Institute of Technology. Okay, so with that top-tier education under his belt, Kalam steps onto the professional stage. And this is where things get really exciting. This is the moment he starts to become the rocket scientist and begins to launch India's biggest dreams, literally, dreams of reaching the stars. His first stop was at the DRDO, that's the Defense Research and Development Organization. But the really game-changing move came when he shifted over to ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization. And ISRO, well, that's where he was destined to make history. And once he got to ISRO, he didn't waste any time. He became a key player, a real leader. He was put right at the heart of developing India's very first satellite launch vehicle. Think about that for a second. Building a rocket from the ground up for a space program that was, back then, still just finding its feet. A huge task. That vehicle had a name, the SLV-III, Satellite Launch Vehicle 3. And this wasn't just another project. This was a giant leap. This was the mission that was going to put India's space program on the global map for good. And you know what? All that incredible work, it paid off. Big time. In 1980, the SLV-III roared into the sky and perfectly placed the Rohini satellite into orbit, a flawless launch. It was a massive, landmark success for the whole country. And it's really hard to overstate just how huge this was. This wasn't just a win for the scientists. It was a moment of incredible national pride. With that single launch, India joined a very, very exclusive club, the club of nations that could reach space on their own. But Kalam's work wasn't just about looking up at the stars. He was soon pulled into a role that would totally define his public image and give him that famous nickname. This is how he becomes India's missile man and helps forge a new, self-reliant nation. So he took the lead on something called the Integrated Guided Missile Development Program, basically a huge project to develop India's own defensive missiles. We're talking about systems like the Agni, a powerful long-range ballistic missile, and the Prithvi, a tactical surface-to-surface missile. And these weren't just weapons, you see. They were absolute game-changers that gave India real strategic independence. And yep, this is where he earns that title, Missile Man of India. And it's so much more than a cool nickname. It was really a sign of respect for his leadership, for making the country truly self-reliant in this super critical area. It really marked a new era of strength. And his influence just kept growing. He was also right at the center of the Pokhran-II nuclear tests back in 1998. This was another major moment that really solidified India's defense capabilities on the world stage. So from top scientist to head of state, this next chapter in his life is maybe the most famous of all. This is where he becomes the people's president, leading with a kind of humility and vision that was just completely inspiring. So in 2002, something happens that I think surprised a lot of people, but was celebrated all over the country. The scientist, A.P.J. Abdul Kalam, becomes the 11th president of India. The fact that he wasn't a politician was actually seen as a huge plus, and over the next 5 years, he would completely redefine what it meant to be president. So that nickname, the people's president, why did it stick? It really boils down to two things. First, his lifestyle was just so simple and humble.
And second, he had this genuine, powerful connection with young people, with students. For him, being president was never about power or status. It was about service.
And as president, his priorities were crystal clear. He was always talking about education and innovation. He saw them as the engines for India's progress. He was constantly pushing his vision for India 2020, which was this whole roadmap for turning the country into a developed nation. And he was always focused on empowering the youth, writing these incredible, inspiring books like Wings of Fire to light a spark in them.
So after a life like that, what's left behind? What's his legacy? I think you can sum it up in one word: inspiration. His entire life is just this incredible source of lasting inspiration.
And the way he passed away, it almost feels like it was scripted. It was July 27th, 2015. He was standing on a stage giving a lecture to students at IIM Shillong. He collapsed while doing the one thing he loved most in the world: teaching. It just perfectly summed up his entire life's mission.
When you look back, his legacy really stands on three main pillars. First, just relentless hard work and never giving up. Second, true simplicity and humility, even when he was the most powerful person in the country. And third, just this unshakable lifelong dedication to building a better India.
And of course, a life like that doesn't go unrecognized. He was awarded India's highest civilian honors. He received the Padma Bhushan in '81, then the Padma Vibhushan in 1990, and finally, the big one, the Bharat Ratna, the nation's highest honor, in 1997.
So when you think about it, his entire journey, from a kid selling newspapers on a small town street all the way to the presidential palace, it just leaves you with this one big question. What can a single, dedicated person truly achieve? And if you look at the life of A.P.J. Abdul Kalam, the answer seems pretty clear. Almost anything.